So today we're going to talk about some breaking news having to do with Ravenswood City School District, and then we'll turn our attention to the VTA, bus services that are proposed to be cut in Palo Alto and why leaders are concerned about that. Let's dive in. Elena, just a couple weeks ago we were talking about Ravenswood and the charter school expansion that was causing some concern there. Then the shoe drops this week. Tell us what happened and when.
Yeah, that feels like a distant memory. The news broke on Wednesday night that the board put Gloria Hernandez-Goff, the superintendent, on paid administrative leave. And while it was kind of a sudden, no advance notice kind of a thing, the general reaction I got when I was trying to call around to find out what happened was that, issues have been simmering for a long time, and there's now a new board that recognizes those issues. And while we can only speculate on what reasons actually prompted the leave, since it happened in closed session and the board members have not said anything publicly, all of those issues that have sort of been going on in the community for a while seem to be part of what's prompted that.
Yeah, now there is a new board, so 2 of the 3 new members, one is reelected. Did they campaign on a platform of getting rid of the superintendent, or what was their stance? Was it obvious that once they came on board, something was going to happen?
I don't think they so explicitly said that, but they certainly were motivated to run because of the sort of unrest and concern in the community about her leadership and sort of general leadership in the school district and the direction that Ravenswood is headed. There were certainly reform campaigns of sort of things need to be done differently. We want to shake up the status quo. We want to be more transparent and be more responsive to the community. So I think certainly, and I heard that a lot during the campaign, what people were also hoping for was that they would take some action like this to remove Gloria.
Yeah. So Wednesday afternoon, the email is sent out. Thursday morning, the story continues to unfold.
Right. So an email was sent out to staff on Wednesday notifying them about the leave and said that the assistant superintendent, Lorena Morales-Ellis, would be taking over in the meantime until just as acting superintendent.
Yeah.
And then Thursday, Lorena sends an email to the board president saying she's going to decline and she's basically working 12-plus hour days and she cannot take on additional responsibilities at this time.
Yeah.
So that added a whole other wrinkle to it. The board met in closed session last night, and when they came out and announced that they had instead appointed Gina Sudaria, who's the director of student services and is very well liked. She's come up through the district as a teacher, as a principal, so I think a lot of people who are teachers and principals feel like she's sort of one of their own, even though now she's in the district office.
Yeah.
So she's going to hold things over in the interim
while
Gloria's on leave, which it's unclear how long that will last or what the sort of end result will be.
I think it's striking that even if she's really liked, the vote was 3-2, and we don't know who voted how because it's all closed session. But I'm just curious, more generally, are there any people on the board who you want to consider as allies of the superintendent who's on leave?
Yeah, I mean,
if we have to guess who the 3 are, which
sure.
I'm not asking you. But,
yeah, I mean, I think we can make a pretty good guess at and this was a 3-2 vote for Gina Sudaria's appointment and the same 3-2 vote for placing Gloria on leave. And they have not said who voted which way publicly, but the incumbents, two of the incumbents, Anna Polito and Sharifa Wilson, have publicly defended the superintendent. They've been on the board throughout, teachers taking a vote of no confidence, other sort of very strong criticism that wasn't really aired out further than, that was never agendized. Teachers felt like we took this huge step and no one really listened to us or validated our concerns. So those 2 board members have certainly defended the superintendent and said that, they brought her in to turn around the district, and she's put in place new STEM programming, new maker spaces. She got off the new comprehensive middle school off the ground, which was a huge undertaking. And then the other 3 board members, Maria Elena Gona Mendoza, who was elected a few years ago, and then the 2 new board members, you can hazard a guess that they were the ones who would have supported placing the superintendent on leave, given the reform-minded campaigns of the 2 new board members. Maria Elena, who has been very openly critical who voted against renewing Gloria's contract last year. So if you had to guess at how things broke down, that
Right.
And I found it very striking that on Wednesday night, like the school district, like public information person had no idea this happened. And I also, like according to your reporting, and I also think it's really strange that they announced her replacement, who later said, "I'm not doing it. I don't want the job." All these things are super strange. But it strikes me that I understand that people who support the superintendent would vote against it. But now that she's been placed on leave, like them voting against the person yesterday, that was a little weird.
right, and we don't know that that's the case, but I think it could just be, they were so staunchly opposed to the leave that they wanted to oppose anything that attached to it. It's unclear. I think they would want to just be able to support whoever's going to have to lead the district in the meantime.
Yeah, and Polito and Wilson were the ones who, when the contract renewal came up, they voted for
Yes.
her contract, so it makes sense that they might be the ones who opposed the leave.
And Anna, in her re-election bid in November, stressed very much, continuity of leadership, not wanting to. So compared to shaking up the status quo, she was very much about we need to keep things as they are because things are kind of tenuous, and shaking that up will be harmful for the district.
Yeah. So if this is the first step of the board to remove the superintendent, I know you have the contract from 2015, which is not, we don't know that all these conditions were rolled over to the renewed contract, but it's a safe assumption that many are. So there's some stipulations about what needs to happen
Right.
in order for her to be removed. It's like a 3-month, 120-day, is that 4 months? 120-day notice, I believe.
To terminate without cause.
Yes, terminate without cause.
And the board can terminate for cause, which is includes failure to perform any of her duties or responsibilities in her contract, violating board policies, or violating relevant laws of the state.
Yeah, and her contract in 2015 started at $181,000 base salary, and she's gotten cost of living adjustments, I believe, since then.
Yeah, I believe her raises are the same as whatever management are receiving. So her salary has gone up a little bit, but there was also some rumors in the community that she had gotten a big raise with her renewal of her contract, and that wasn't true last year.
Okay.
I think it's kind of easy to get caught up in kind of Game of Thrones kind of maneuvering around the personalities and stuff. But I think one question I have is on broader policies for the district, because as you reported, they're facing huge financial challenges they had in the past, and they hired this outside firm that recommended all these kind of layoffs. Do you expect that whoever replaces Hernandez Goff will take a different direction, and what impact will a leadership change, do you think, could possibly have on how the school district goes about saving money and cutting costs?
I think that a new approach would certainly help. I think there's so many moving parts there. The financial issues. There's still the issue with KIPP needing more space, which even if they figure out sort of something for next year, they're gonna grow again the year after. So I think and thinking about sort of what I've covered in the Palo Alto School District of the difference that strong and fresh leadership makes, and just the commitment to systems and sort of process is really key to getting a district on a better path financially or otherwise. And I think also in Ravenswood, there's this sense of so much unrest and conflict, and not everyone is on the same page on this, but the tone in the meeting last night was so much more, people were literally clapping and on their feet when the board walked in the room. So and not everyone shares that view, but just the sense of sort of repairing wounds and heading forward in a more positive light, I think would help us. And a leader that a majority of the district stands behind would be helpful.
It seems like there hasn't been a clear vision for the district, as well as operational problems. Last year, the East Palo Alto mayor at the time called the district a culture of corruption, and cited various challenges he viewed, including like budget mismanagement, nepotism, and things like that. So it seems like
it's more about tidying things up rather than taking a specific policy and reversing it.
Right.
I think so, and it's the same case in Palo Alto of just getting that back to operations and sort of the bread and butter of how things work, and then having people be confident that in the processes and being transparent also, and that because there's so much sort of fear that things are being hidden or sort of you're pulling something on the community when things aren't sort of aired properly. So that's part of it.
Yeah. So it's unclear what's going to happen next, although Gina Sudaria, the terms of her new position need to be worked out. with the
Right,
board,
and
right?
they said last night that they'll do that at another meeting, so that will be to come.
Yeah. And then also there's a March 15th looming deadline for the budget
Yes.
in terms of notification of layoffs.
Yes, so it seems like staff layoffs are likely. It's unclear exactly how many. The board's having another budget study session on Monday, and then they have a meeting literally the day before that March 15th cutoff.
Yeah, and they're looking to trim, was it 2 million this year from the budget? Last year was 5 million.
Right.
Yeah, keep cutting. Okay. Thanks for your work this week, and we look forward to seeing what happens next. We're going to move to more budget woes, this time to the transit agency, VTA. Palo Alto's Policy and Services Committee had a meeting this past week in which they discussed the budget cuts, and some leaders are not very happy.
I don't know if I would say some. Yeah, yeah, the council members aren't happy. They see this as like a huge trend that goes back decades of the VTA, a body that's based in San Jose, but that sets bus policies for the entire county. They see it as another example of them basically giving Palo Alto the shaft and taking its resources and putting it in San Jose.
Yeah.
And so these tensions kind of bubbled up with a lot of residents, a few dozen people from like Channing House speaking out against the proposed service reductions. And one council member, Greg Tanaka, being very adamant about what he sees as a very inequitable way the VTA is run, and basically saying the city should no longer support the VTA or give it any money, which is kind of a dicey proposition since tax funds, like by default, go to there. But
right. Yeah, I know this theme came up when the county was voting on Measure B in 2016, I believe it was, and the North County cities and I believe also West Valley kind of got together and said, well, if all this money is being raised, then you guys better bring some of it up here, which I think was kind of a sticking point.
It was a huge sticking point. The VTA has had three bonds since 2000. The first one, like bulk of it went to BART. I'd say I think it's like just like 3 out of 4 billion or something like that. Then the next bond went entirely to BART in 2008,
which I think was spelled out.
It was spelled out, but it still kind of makes people uncomfortable. Yeah. So in 2015, as the VTA was planning its 2016 bond, Joe Simidian did his analysis showing that about 80% of all the money from these bonds went to BART and then South County Services. So, you know, the cities really bristled on that, and they came together and they made sure that the 2016 bond would spell out exactly like what the North County would get. And so we have this $700 million allocation for grade separations for Palo Alto, Mountain View, and Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
You have all sorts of bike pedestrian improvements that are supposed to go up north. And that's been held up in court until recently. So I think there's some assurance that they're going to get it, but the tension still remains, and a large part of it has to do with the governance structure. And
no representation on the board.
Yeah,
Palo Alto specifically.
Palo Alto has a quarter of a seat. There's four seats that like Mountain View, Los Altos Hills, and Palo Alto. They share one out of like I think it's like 8 or 12 seats. But so it's rotating. But the city of San Jose has 5 seats, and then there's a couple of others by Santa Clara County supervisors, which more often than not are San Jose people as well. So,
how are those seats determined and filled?
I think there's different seats for. Like each seat has its own ways determined. Like the Santa Clara County would, for example, select its representative on the board, and the seat that's appointed to certain cities, those cities would decide their representative. But whoever they pick, it's still a quarter. Right now, John McAllister from Mountain View occupies like the North County seat. But even if it was Palo Alto person, like what could they do when there's like 7 people on the board who would vote against it?
Yeah.
So it's an uncomfortable situation, and I think Tanaka, like other people, believe it should be addressed before the city contributes anything else to the VTA.
Yeah, I think Nissa's comment that you quoted in the article was interesting about how Palo Alto and many cities are trying to get people out of driving, solo driving, and into public transit. But if the public transit's not going to be there, then that's working at cross purposes. And I know that's a big theme for Palo Alto right now, especially with the transit management agencies or associations, coming online.
And it's a huge conundrum, and it's also made worse by the fact that VTA has like a policy of protect South Bay, or protect the South County, which was like the board of directors adopted, which really pissed a lot of people here off. Like that's your official policies to make sure. And there's this map that Greg Tanaka kept on referring to, which is like bus routes.
Yeah.
You look at the South County, you see just like a sea of red routes and little things.
Yeah.
You move up here, there's like a little sprinkling of
We
blue.
have one right here.
Yeah, there is like a nice concentration of red routes on this map, which shows like the Palo Alto area. But these are all express buses, a lot of which are going to be either reduced or discontinued entirely.
And some of which only operate during commute hours too.
Precisely. Yeah, and so from the VTA's perspective, this is sound business. Like they're cutting, areas which don't have a lot of ridership. In some cases, like the VTA has to pay like $41 per rider to subsidize this.
Yeah.
So they're like, we need to cut $15 million. We have a budget deficit, so it's the business sense. But the other view is you guys aren't a business, you're a public agency. Like if you're a business, why is Palo Alto paying you money?
Yeah, I think they phrase it in terms of like ridership versus coverage area. They're trying to boost more routes that serve more riders and not pay attention to coverage as much. I think going down to maybe 10%.
Are they cutting any lines in San Jose, South Bay area?
Not that I know of. I haven't really explored it that much. But I think Adam Berger, like the senior transportation planner for the VTA, did like a really good job explaining like the two philosophical difference. There's the coverage model in which has more routes but fewer riders per route. They're spread out. Versus the ridership model in which you have a few routes but they're in very dense areas and it's much more cost effective. And so in the past it was like a 70-30 split. 70% of VTA's routes were devoted to the ridership model where you get a lot of riders, like the 22 and the 522 that go up and down El Camino. And about 30% of its resources were devoted to kind of like areas around Gun High, kind of like the more peripheral areas. And they're switching to like a 90-10 model. So it's like, so if you live like in far off places, it's you're in trouble. And he also mentioned that the whole Protect South Bay thing is meant to make sure that there's areas in South County that would have no service whatsoever if the VTA discontinued. So that's why they wanted to have buses there, which creates another conundrum for Palo Alto. Like if you're going to invest all this public money into like Palo Alto shuttle or other services, is the VTA then just going to say, oh, you've invested all this money, now you have routes, you don't need us anymore. And so they'll reduce
Palo
it
Alto
even
would
further.
say, give us our money then.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen. So it's a tough dilemma, and one that the city's been wrestling with for a number of years.
There were some members of the public who came to speak. What are they saying about the hardships that would be created for them if the bus routes are cut?
Well, they're saying it's a travesty and it's totally counterintuitive. I mean, you want to boost your ridership and you're going to make like bus ridership much more rare. You're going to have even fewer riders on those rare buses because it's not good service. So it's kind of like, they think it's a terrible idea. There were a few people who used like the late night buses, the 22. It's going to go from 24 hours to they won't have a bus between 1 and 4 a.m., which is going to impact about 40 people who seek shelter in those buses. But and there's
and seniors are having some concerns about it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the 22, but
they're talking about the fact that Palo Alto has a big senior population. The senior population is growing, and to reduce bus service at this time is going to force more seniors to drive, which
and some shouldn't be driving, or some have already given up their licenses.
As they admit, as they freely admit, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of seniors weren't happy, and nobody really spoke in favor of the new plan.
Okay. What is the city going to do now about VTA? Was that just a study session? Hey, we're going to cut your services and that's it?
Yeah,
they
didn't have any actions. I presume there's already been one letter that Liz Niss sent out, kind of making those points that we're trying to encourage people to get out of cars and we're encouraging development in transit-friendly areas, and you're kind of undermining that. It's possible the city could deliver like another more strongly worded letter, but aside from that, there's really not much the city can do up until the VTA is requesting more bonds, in which case we might see like a revolt from other North County cities who are not getting their fair share.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, TBD. Thank you both. That wraps up this edition of Behind the Headlines. If you want to stay up to date on Palo Alto news, you can subscribe to Express, which is our free newsletter that comes into your email inbox on weekdays. Just go to paloaltoonline.com/express to subscribe. We'll see you next week.